Okay, so I want you to now do a little bit of an exercise. I want you to imagine you're building a stateful packet filter. And now we want to enforce a little bit of a more interesting policy. Let's say you want to allow inbound connections to a particular FTP server, except you don't want anyone to be able to log in as root. All right, so I want you to think about how you would design, how you would build a stateful packet filter to enforce that policy. And I'll give you a little bit of background for how FTP works. FTP uses TCP connections, and it sends textual commands over the TCP connection. And so when the FTP client wants to log into an FTP server, the first thing it does is it sends two commands. It sends the user command with a username and a pass command with a password. And then if that's successful, then the client has logged in, and now the client can download files from the FTP server. Okay, so with that background, think about how you'd build a packet filter to enforce this policy. And in particular, what kind of state would your stateful packet filter need to keep for each connection? So think about that, and then type in the chat your thoughts on that. All right, I sense silence. So maybe, does anyone want to share on chat? Is this easy or hard? What makes this easy? What makes this hard? Good, good, good feedback. Yeah, so we have this IP address for an internal FTP server. We don't want to block all connections to it. We want to allow some connections and block others. And when the connection is initiated, we won't know yet. When we see the three-way TCP handshake, we won't know yet what username the user is going to log in as. So we got to allow it at that point. But then, as this connection proceeds, depending on the data, on the payload data, if the user logs in as Alice, okay, fine, that's cool. We're happy with that. But if the user starts to log in as root, then whoa, cut things off. Now block everything that might follow on that connection. So we can't use just IP addresses, because whether the user logs in as Alice or as root, it's going to be the same IP addresses either way. We can't modify the FTP server. We want to do this in the firewall. If you could modify the FTP server, you wouldn't need a firewall, but let's say you want to enforce this in the firewall. This is hard, yeah, because the firewall has to understand not just TCP headers, but has to look at the TCP payload and parse that to understand the FTP protocol. Okay, good. So one piece of state we'd like to keep for each connection is, was that an FTP connection or not? So we could do that using the port numbers. Are the contents of the user command plain text? Yes, all the commands are sent in plain text. They're like ASCII text. Okay, so we want to remember information for each connection, because if someone tried to log in as root to the FTP server on some connection, then we want to block further packets sent along that connection. So we're going to need to remember for that connection, oh boy, block anything more that might come along this connection. Okay, so good. So we should remember for each connection whether or not it was an FTP connection. We're going to want to remember what username the client is trying to log in as. Great. Okay. So the kinds of ideas you could imagine, the simplest solution you could imagine is don't be stateful. Just drop any packet to this FTP server that has the word root in it. And as we're going to see in a moment, that's not sufficient. So the kind of state I think you want to keep is for each connection. Is it an FTP connection? Where is it in FTP state? Like, have you seen any commands yet? If you saw a command, what command did you see? Where are we? Have you seen the argument to that command? We'll want to keep track of whether that was an inbound or an outbound connection. We'll want to keep track of the username that was sent after the user command, if one has appeared yet. Okay.